All right, so today we're going to take a deep dive into some pretty serious political drama.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, we're talking about Representative Al Green, uh, Democrat from Texas, who
Yeah.
was recently censured by the House, and like the whole firestorm that's come after that. So
Yeah.
we've got like news articles and these really passionate discussions happening all over social media,
Yeah.
and even some pretty powerful video clips of Green himself.
Yes,
So by the end of this, you'll not only know like what went down, but also why it's causing such a stir and what it tells us about like the political landscape we're in right now.
I think one of the most interesting things about this whole situation is that it's not just a simple Republicans versus Democrats kind of thing.
Yeah.
The vote in the censure actually revealed some pretty big rifts, like cracks within the Democratic Party itself.
Wow.
And it's making people ask some hard questions about, like, how do you oppose a president when a lot of people are really worried about what he's doing? And does decorum, like being polite and following the rules,
Mhm.
does that ever have to take a back seat to what you believe in?
Right, right.
So it's pretty fascinating stuff.
So let's like set the scene. Imagine President Trump's addressing Congress. The whole room is, the cameras are everywhere.
Yeah.
And then suddenly Representative Green interrupts and just shouts out, "You have no mandate to cut Medicaid."
And that's when things get really serious.
Oh, yeah.
A censure from the House that's like their biggest slap on the wrist, short of actually kicking someone out.
Wow.
It's only happened less than 25 times in U.S. history, and it almost never happens to someone from your own party.
Really?
Yeah, and get this, 10 Democrats actually sided with the Republicans to censure Green,
Huh.
which means this isn't just about what Green did. It's like it's pointing to something much deeper going on.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing was pretty dramatic to watch, Green being escorted out, and then
Yeah.
later you see some Democrats singing, "We shall overcome," in response to the censure. It felt like they were purposely trying to make it feel like the civil rights movement, and that's something Green himself keeps bringing up.
Well, yeah, there's definitely a strategy at play here. Green calls it righteous incivility.
Righteous incivility, huh?
Yeah, he's basically saying that there's a difference between disagreeing respectfully and fighting against injustice, even if it ruffles some feathers.
I see.
It's like those sit-ins during the civil rights era, challenging segregation laws.
Mhm.
Green saying that sometimes staying silent is the same as being complicit. And that's a really powerful statement in the world we're living in right now.
Yeah, no kidding. And Green doesn't just stop with that one outburst during the speech. He goes on to give these interviews where he's fiercely defending Medicaid,
Right.
calling it a moral imperative to speak up for the people who really depend on it.
Oh, wow.
He even called out Elon Musk directly, saying, "Mr. Musk has doctors. He will get the best health care. Let him understand that he should be on my side, on the side of the people who need this health care."
Green's making a pretty stark contrast there.
Yeah.
He's showing how policies like cutting Medicaid can have real-world impacts on everyday people's lives,
Right.
and by calling out someone like Musk, who's often seen as like the symbol of success and innovation,
Yeah.
he's trying to make this about more than just some abstract policy.
Mhm.
He's making it about real human consequences.
Yeah, and he's definitely not backing down from the backlash either.
Hmm.
He actually said, "I'm willing to suffer whatever punishment is available to me. It's worth it to let people know that there are some of us who are going to stand up against this president's desire to cut Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security,"
Wow.
which is a pretty strong stance to take when you know there's going to be pushback.
Yeah. And that's where things get really tricky.
Okay.
Remember those 10 Democrats who voted to censure Green?
Yeah.
That wasn't just them saying they disapproved.
Yeah.
This was them formally condemning him, saying his actions were serious enough to warrant that kind of response. And we're talking to Representatives Barricades Costa, Gillen Himes, Houlihan Captor, Moskowitz, Perez, and Swotzi.
Yeah.
To really understand this, we need to figure out why they made that choice. What were they saying their reasons were?
Yeah.
Was it about how Green went about it, or are there like deeper disagreements within the party about how they should be opposing things?
Okay, so I've got Green making this big dramatic stand and then split within his own party.
Right.
What's the public's reaction been like? Because I can only imagine social media has been blowing up over this.
Oh, yeah, you're totally right online, especially
Yeah.
on platforms like Reddit and YouTube. It's gotten pretty heated, to say the least.
Really?
Yeah, some people are calling Green a hero, saying he's the only one brave enough to actually stand up to Trump.
Wow.
You say terms like Dino thrown around, Democrat in name only, to criticize those who voted for the censure.
Oh, wow.
They're being called cowards, accused of being controlled opposition.
So there's a lot of anger and frustration directed at those Democrats who censured Green.
Yeah,
It sounds like the people who support what Green did see this as a betrayal.
exactly. And I think this points to a bigger issue that Green's actions have brought to light:
What's that?
the struggle happening within the Democratic Party itself.
Interesting.
On one side, you've got people demanding bolder action, more confrontation. They're willing to break with tradition to resist what they see as really dangerous policies.
Okay.
And then there's the other side, who are all about unity and decorum. They're saying Green's tactics are going to backfire. It could even push away moderate voters.
So it's like two very different approaches to the same problem.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole situation so fascinating.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's a tough balancing act.
Mm,
How do you push back against a president who seems to, thrive on this chaos and disruption,
yeah.
but without, resorting to those same tactics?
Right.
And then there's the question of, when does being polite and following the rules actually become part of the problem?
Yeah, like when does civility become complicity?
Exactly. And Green's critics, from both sides of the aisle, are saying that his outburst was disrespectful, that it shut down dialogue instead of encouraging it.
Mm-hmm.
They say there are better ways to fight policies you disagree with, like through legislation, through the courts, through public pressure.
So it's like this tension between needing to be decorous and the urgency of taking a stand.
Yeah,
And in his response to the censure, Green directly connects what he did to the civil rights movement.
right.
He argued that the people who fought for equality back then were also condemned for their methods for breaking with the norms of the time.
He's bringing up a really powerful historical parallel.
Yeah.
Think about the lunch counter sit-ins, the freedom rides, the marches,
Mm-hmm.
all these acts of defiance of civil disobedience
Right.
that were intentionally breaking societal norms to expose injustice and demand change. And Green's saying that sometimes you got to disrupt things to make your voice heard, even if you get criticized for it.
And he didn't stop there in his response. He also brought up some specific things that President Trump has done that he sees as dangerous, maybe even going beyond what a president is allowed to do.
Oh, well, like what?
He mentioned the pardons Trump gave to those who stormed the Capitol,
Right.
his comments about lunatics,
hmm
and the possibility that he might just ignore court orders.
So he's painting a picture of a president who's not playing by the rules,
Yeah.
who's maybe even weakening our democratic institutions.
Right, and he's connecting that to his own actions, saying that when you're facing threats like that, maybe the normal rules of civility don't apply anymore.
That's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah, and this leads us to Green's next move. He's announced he's going to introduce articles of impeachment against President Trump.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow, so he's going all in.
and he's specifically pointing to President Trump calling for ethnic cleansing in Gaza as the reason for impeachment.
That's a huge escalation.
Yeah.
It's not just criticizing Trump's policies anymore.
Yeah.
It's directly saying he shouldn't be president.
So let's break this down. Green's saying that Trump's rhetoric is a direct threat to global justice and that doing nothing about it isn't an option.
Right.
What are the arguments for and against impeachment in a situation like this? Is just saying inflammatory things enough to remove a president from office?
Well, impeachment is a really complex process with a lot of weight behind it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about whether a president committed a crime.
Yeah.
It's also about whether what they're doing is a danger to the country or if they've broken the public's trust.
Right.
And Green is saying that Trump's rhetoric fits that description, that his words have real consequences, and those consequences could be really bad.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Green's motivations, the public's reaction, the whole historical and political context. And now he's taking this drastic step of introducing articles of impeachment.
That's a lot to unpack.
But before we wrap up, I want to go back to those 10 Democrats who voted to censure Green.
Okay.
We talked about some of the reasons why they might have done that.
Right.
But I'm curious to learn more about their backgrounds, their constituencies,
Yeah.
What kind of pressures might they be facing that led them to break with their party on this?
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the big picture, but each of these representatives is an individual with their own political calculations,
Yeah.
their own relationships with the people they represent.
Mhm.
Some of them are from districts that are more moderate politically.
Okay.
So going against Trump might not be popular there.
Right.
Others might have felt that while they don't agree with Trump's policies, what Green did was too disruptive, too far outside the lines of acceptable behavior.
So it's not just about ideology, it's about being practical.
Yeah.
About
Yeah.
figuring out how to represent a bunch of different people with different views.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so interesting because it forces us to face the challenges of democracy itself. You know,
Hmm.
how do we balance the need for unity and decorum
Yeah.
with the right to disagree, the right to challenge those in power?
Right.
How do we make sure that everyone's voice is heard, even the ones that are unpopular or make people uncomfortable?
Oh, it's a big question.
Yeah, a really big one.
Yeah, it feels like
Right.
Rep. Green's actions have really like thrown a wrench into everything, you know?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
He's forcing this conversation that I think a lot of people would probably rather just avoid, you know?
Hmm.
Highlighting the fact that there's no easy answer here.
Yeah, he's really shaking things up. And what's so interesting is that it goes beyond just disagreements about policy.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Green's tapping into this like deeper anxiety about the state of our democracy.
Okay.
Like what's exceptional behavior for our leaders and what's our responsibility as citizens to hold them accountable.
It feels like so many people are just disillusioned with politics these days, you know? Cynicism and apathy are everywhere. But
Right.
Green's standing up and saying, I will not be silent.
Right.
And even if you don't agree with how he's going about it, you got to admit it takes guts to put yourself out there like that.
It's a huge contrast to the way things usually work in politics. You know,
Yeah.
all those carefully calculated moves.
Hmm.
Green's willing to risk his career, his reputation, to make a statement.
Yeah.
And that really connects with people, even those who don't agree with him.
Right.
They see someone who's genuinely passionate about this,
Hmm.
who's willing to fight for what he believes in.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's kind of refreshing in a political climate where it often feels like everyone's just playing a part,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah. So we've really gone deep on Rep. Green's censure, the reasons behind it, the reactions it sparked, and his next move with impeachment.
Mm,
And it's clear that this is way more than just some procedural thing.
right.
It's brought to light the cracks in our democracy, the challenges of dissent, and the question of what we're willing to put up with from our leaders. But I want to leave you with this. Does Rep. Green's story make you rethink the role of protest in a democracy?
Hmm.
What would you do if you felt like the people you elected weren't doing enough to fight for what you believe in?
That's a question we all have to wrestle with.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
where do you draw the line?
Right.
When do you say enough is enough?
Mm.
When do you decide that things are so important that you have to speak up, even if there might be consequences?
It's tough.
There's no easy answer, but it's a conversation we need to be having.
Because in the end, this isn't just about Al Green.
You know?
It's about the kind of democracy we want to live in, the kind of future we want to build, and that's a story that's still being written, a story that we all have a part in shaping.
That's a great way to put it.